Welcome back to another project video. This is a board I call Voltlog 7 and it's the base for a semi-automated test and programming fixture that I plan to build for my VoltLink boards. So for those that are new to the channel, let me explain what the VoltLink is and why I need to test it in an automated way. The VoltLink is this very basic USB to serial adapter that I designed many years ago to solve the issue of inconsistent variable quality that I was getting with cheap USB to serial adapters received from AliExpress. As my full-time job, I design electronics, and almost on a daily basis I need to interface to the boards I design via a serial link for testing, debug, and further development. So I designed the VoltLink to just have a very reliable USB to serial adapter that can work at high speeds in excess of 2 million baud rate. Then I started offering this via my Tindy store because apparently a bunch of other people were having the same issues with AliExpress sourced adapters. So now I'm selling quite a few of these on a monthly basis. And I manufacture my VoltLinks in panels of 6, which is kind of a sweet spot in terms of costs as well as other design for manufacturing factors. And when I receive these from the PCB Assembly factory, I need to test and program them before packaging and shipping them to customers. And first I want to make sure that at least on a basic level each one of these adapters powers up and enumerates over USB, and then I want to flash a custom config file to the chip which tells it what kind of product it is, how much current it should request from the upstream port, and it also configures the TX and RX LEDs to flash on activity. And the way I've been doing this so far is one by one connecting a USB Type-C cable to my computer and flashing the config from the Scilab's Simplicity Studio. This is a software that Scilabs offers, but as you can imagine, this is a very repetitive, tedious task. It also doesn't leave me with any logs of what particular serial numbers have been tested and flashed. And if at some point I accidentally skip testing one unit, there will be no logs of that happening, and a bad unit might end up at the customer. This is my little project, my particular story, but you can easily imagine how this could be adapted for any project at any scale. Bottom line is, if you're going to do any kind of manufacturing, you need some form of automated testing. So I thought about all of this for a while and came up with this concept. I would need a USB hub to be able to connect all 6 boards at the same time to an upstream port, and this would save time because I could flash all 6 boards pretty much at the same time. You could just go and buy like a multi-port off-the-shelf USB hub, but that will just lead to a mess of wires and you don't get any diagnostics from an off-the-shelf USB hub. So I decided to design my own. I would also need some kind of computer to run software for that upstream port, and the software would be able to test that individual VoltLinks power up and enumerate over USB. The software could potentially also check for additional stuff like, overcurrent conditions, and then it would flash the config file to each one of the VoltLinks and record the output for storing it for future reference. Then to bring all of this together, I would also need some kind of test jig that would allow quick insertion and removal of this entire panel without having to use individual USB cables, and that would save a lot of time. The way this is typically done in the industry is with some vertical spring-loaded contacts called pogo pins. So you place some test pads on the back of or front of your PCB, then when you insert your board into a test jig, the pogo pins individually create an electrical connection with the test pads. And in this part 1 video, we'll be addressing the first 2 items, the USB hub and the upstream computer port, while the actual test jig will be addressed in part 2. So if you're interested in learning more about automated test jigs, subscribe to my channel and continue watching this video. So for the USB hub part, I started searching the web for chips that offered this functionality with as little external circuitry required. And my requirements here were to have at least 6 downstream ports, USB high-speed capability, although full speed would also probably be okay for my application, and it would also be nice if it would have some kind of diagnostics functionality. Additionally, I prefer if the chip comes from a known manufacturer because I'll get better support in case of trouble, and also during design phase. I know you can sometimes nest USB hubs, so I could be getting like 2 4-port hubs, for example, and nesting them, but that's something I really wanted to avoid just to keep things simpler and avoid potential issues down the road. And my search quickly narrowed it down to this guy from Microchip, the USB2517, which is a USB 2.0 high-speed configurable 7-port hub controller. And this chip ticked many of the requirements, plus some additional nice extras. It comes in a manageable QFN64 package, it's available at multiple distributors, sells for a reasonable cost, uses minimal external circuitry, it can be configured via an external EEPROM or via an I2C interface, and it can also run with an internal default config if you don't need any custom settings. So this means that you just give it a couple of resistors, some bypass capacitors and a clock, and your USB hub is up and running. I very much like these kinds of chips, so I started designing the schematic of my project around this USB hub chip. Because I wanted the design to stay flexible, I did introduce additional circuitry, but I generally followed the reference design from Microchip. I'll just give you a general overview. I didn't know if I was going to need the external EEPROM option, but I designed it in anyway. And each output port goes through a power distribution switch, and the hub controller has control over these switches, so it can turn power on or off to individual ports, and it can do that automatically based on fault conditions like overcurrent. And that's pretty neat for a test setup where at some point you might end up with a bad board that will trigger an overcurrent condition. There are loads of status LEDs on these boards because, again, it's a test fixture and I want the ability to quickly figure out what's happening. In terms of power, I opted for this design where the hub itself is self-powered, meaning it wouldn't draw any power from the upstream port, but instead it would have its own separate power input, and for that I have 3 different options: a USB 5 volts in port, a DC jack, and a screw connector, which both can go up to 17 volts DC input. And then this DC voltage is stepped down by a DC to DC converter to 5 volts, which is then fed into the load switches. So this is pretty much all I needed in terms of the USB hub, but I also started thinking about the computer side of things, and I quickly figured out that a Raspberry Pi Zero is going to give me more than enough processing power for the relatively simple scripts that I need to run. So I started thinking about how to integrate this Pi Zero onto the same USB hub PCB and to optimize it for cost and for ease of assembly as well as reliability. Now remember, to increase reliability, you have to keep your wiring simple. So I decided that the Raspberry Pi GPIO would plug directly into my hub PCB, which would give the Raspberry Pi direct access to UART, I2C, and status debug GPIO from our hub controller. The Pi can just read individual GPIOs from the hub controller to figure out if there is an overcurrent condition or if there is power to a particular output port. As for the upstream port to the Pi Zero, there was the option of running an external USB, a micro USB to connect to the upstream port of the USB hub, but I didn't really like that option. I think the micro USB ports on the Pi Zero are quite fiddly and they can be easily ripped off the PCB. So instead I decided to try something nicer. Now, if you look on the back of the Pi Zero, there are some test points, because in a similar fashion to what I'm presenting here, the Raspberry Pi guys are testing the Raspberry Pi in production, but if I have test pads for the USB data plus, data minus, plus 5 volts and ground, which is the USB port on the Raspberry Pi, it means that I could run pogo pins and interface to these test pads on the back of the Pi Zero, which is a pretty neat idea. So there was quite a lot of mechanical stuff to figure out in the PCB layout of the VoltHub 7. I had to make sure that everything would fit in this Pi Zero area. And the Raspberry Pi Foundation does not publish a mechanical drawing with the location of the test point. So I just had to use my calipers to figure out the dimensions and the coordinates of these test pads in relationship with the mounting holes. I also had to figure out the correct height at which to place the Pi Zero in relation with the hub PCB and the pogo pins. I had to find the correct working distance pogo pins. I had to find the correct height mounting post so that everything would fit in place mechanically and I could secure it using screws. So lots of different things had to match for everything to fit in the end. But after some time, I had a design that I was happy with and that I was ready to order it. I proceeded with uploading these Gerber files to PCBWay.com, which is the official provider of printed circuit boards for the Voltlog channel, and I also opted to get a steel stencil to help with the assembly. And it's the first time I opted to use this black solder mask with yellow silkscreen, but let me tell you, the result is spectacular and these PCBs are very sexy in this color combo. I think it would work maybe even nicer with matte black solder mask, but even so, I'm very much liking this. And by the way, I will add a link in the description of the video to the KiCad project on GitHub, so if you're interested in this project, you can have a look there. After receiving my PCBs, I proceeded with the usual solder paste application process and then meticulously pick and placing many SMD parts that I have in this design, because I have this unusually high number of 0 ohm jumper resistors, but again, these might come in very handy if I need to debug or rewire some GPIOs. So I tend to use them a lot in projects like this one where the final shape and form might change. I then reflowed my PCB on a hot plate, which produced pretty good results. I also had to manually solder in a bunch of through-hole connectors. I had to fix the alignment on the individual pogo pins. Mechanically, I also had to enlarge the holes, the mounting holes on the Pi Zero, because they are M2.5, and that's something I did not account for when I designed my PCB. I used M3 mounting posts. So since there is plenty of clearance around these mounting holes, it was just a 2-second job with a 3mm drill. I spent a lot of time in the design phase just to make sure everything matches in terms of connector height, mounting stud height, position of the connectors and mounting points. But let me tell you the joy I felt when I put everything together and I found out it all fits. It was all worth it. Just look at how nice the pogo pins match the test pads on the back of the Pi Zero. And through these, the Pi Zero gets power, 5 volts from the hub PCB, while also establishing that USB 2.0 upstream connection. Let me know what you think about this result in the comments below. I then removed the Pi Zero board just to do a quick power-up test, and the voltage rails looked okay. There were no issues whatsoever, minimal current draw. Next, I used the upstream USB port, the one that would normally be connected through pogo pins to the Pi Zero. I used this port to test the board by connecting to my Windows computer, and the hub immediately got discovered. A driver was found automatically on my Windows 11 machine, and all downstream ports were enabled and their LEDs were signaling this. It seemed like the default no EEPROM config is working, and it was also signaled via its special LED. Now, using an app called USB 3 View, I was able to view the USB hub with all of its 7 ports. It is correctly initialized and we can see it's our DIY hub because of the hardware ID, which points to Microchip or SMSC. Seeing that everything initializes okay gave me confidence to also assemble the rest of the through-hole connectors and connect the Raspberry Pi Zero. Again, there were no surprises on power up. The Pi Zero initialized okay. It was getting power from the hub board through the pogo pins, and it connected to my local Wi-Fi, and through SSH, if I run the lsusb command, which is used on Linux to list the USB devices, it does show the USB hub, and I have to admit I was pretty happy seeing this result in my terminal window. To continue the testing, I used 6 individual Type-C cables, plugged in 6 VoltLinks via these cables, which was already looking good from the status LEDs that were signaling a connection was established. I mean the green LEDs you see here. And running lsusb now lists all 6 VoltLinks connected to USB. I then ran the special sauce software from Scilabs to flash and check all 6 boards, and no surprise here either. It does it in very little time and it all just works. And if you're wondering, I'm using the Linux version of the USB Express Host SDK from Scilabs to do all of this programming. So right now I have this working 7-port USB hub, which is manageable from the computer, in this case a Raspberry Pi 02W, and I can run specific software needed for initializing the hub and programming the CP2102 chips from Scilabs, but there's still an important part missing. I don't want to be plugging in 6 USB cables each time I'm testing and flashing a new panel. I want to be using a test jig for that purpose, and this will be a topic for part 2 of this series. What I can tell you right now is that I have all relevant signals present on this JST connector right here. So I will not be using the USB connectors anymore. All signals will pass through this connector and interface via the test jig through pogo pins to test pads placed on the back of the panel with the VoltLinks. There are also a couple of switches here and some status LEDs, and these are also mirrored on this connector, so they can be passed through to the test jig, and they can be used for various purposes, but I will detail that in the next video. Now, I would love to hear from you in the comments below whether you have ever designed or used an automated test jig. I would also like some feedback on this design that I've presented here. Let me know what you would do differently to make things better or nicer in some way. That was all for today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content ahead. Thank you for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next video.